Justice League issue 16 opens with, wow, with several things going on all at once, okay? This is ADHD, the opening scene. So we have a news broadcast running in the background of everything else, establishing how little humanity knows about the oceans and how dangerous they could be. We even have a nice little callback to Darkseid's attack, shown in Justice League issues 1 through 6, saying that humanity's focus has been on attacks from the stars, not from the seas. This helps to explain why humanity hasn't found Atlantis and still doubts its existence. That's a quick, smart bit of world building that I super appreciate. I kind of wish author Jeff Johns had somehow found a way to bring that up earlier in Aquaman's own comic, but getting to it later is better than never getting to it, so thank you. On the League's Watchtower satellite base, Cyborg and Vulko are chatting while this news broadcast happens in the background. Cyborg kind of acts as our living expositor, summing up the basics of where the story is at. Specifically, and most importantly, he says that the Atlanteans are ready for war after their opening strike flooding cities, but they have not yet committed their ground forces. He has also finally located Dr. Stephen Shind, but he kind of doubts how important it actually is to save this guy. So he got a few headlines in the tabloids a few years ago relating to Atlantis, but that's it. Why would anyone care to kill him at all? Vulko then recaps Dr. Shin's role in Arthur's life, which might seem unnecessary to us as Aquaman readers, but this is the Justice League's comic, remember? And those readers might not be buying Aquaman, and they might not know that information. Again, this is a nice detail from Johns. The art team even uses their "we don't ink scenes that relate to Arthur's background if they're memories" thing. Despite the fact that it is Vulko saying this and not Arthur remembering it, so it's kind of a misuse of their own technique, actually, but it's still an incredibly pretty panel. With that knowledge imparted, Cyborg then teleports down in front of Dr. Shin's car, which we have seen driving through the roads as we got the news report, as we got Cyborg and Vulko scene. Again, a lot going on. Cyborg teleporting down almost causes an accident, but thankfully Dr. Shin isn't hurt. He's actually more excited that this threat is finally his chance to restore his good name. They all believe Atlantis exists now, don't they? We are not told where Dr. Shin is going or why he is going there, but we know that he is on the eastern seaboard and that he is going somewhere. Somewhere that I am assuming a camera crew is so that he can get another 15 minutes of fame. Being along the eastern seaboard, though, a massive wave smashes up against the shoreline nearby, splashing water up onto the road. From the sea comes an Atlantean warrior, dressed in thin black armor. This figure, referring to themselves as Drift 1, calls for assistance when he sees Cyborg, and on the other end, the operator confirms that Drift 2 and 3 are en route. It's a good goddamn thing that Cyborg went down to pick up the doctor. Not just to keep him alive, but also because it gives the character something more to do than just be a computer nerd in space watching the entire story happen. Johns specifically brought Cyborg into the Justice League because he wanted to increase the character's profile. But the best way to get people to actually like a character is for that character to do awesome things. That means getting out of the Watchtower and blasting some fools with plasma cannons, and hopefully we'll get to see some of that stuff. If you're wondering why Cyborg hasn't been teleporting around, rescuing humans from the flood, there is a reason. Johns established earlier in this Justice League volume that Cyborg's particular type of teleportation utilizes technology from super-duper bad guy Darkseid's homeworld of Apocalypse. Every time that Cyborg jumps, there is a statistical percentage that the jump drops him and whoever is teleporting with him on Apocalypse. If that means the Justice League, well, that's kind of okay. They can handle that situation. But if he just saved a dozen regular people from drowning, and then he drops them on sci-fi themed hell where everything wants to kill or enslave them, that's not a great look. Over in Boston, we are finally back where we left off last issue. Aquaman has Batman by the throat. Wonder Woman asks what he's doing, and he actually just spells it out. In Atlantean culture, a show of strength establishes dominance. If he orders them to leave, and they actually do, then it might be enough to convince Orm to back off. He then releases Batman. Wonder Woman and Superman somehow aren't willing to play along, though. Orm is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people. He doesn't get to return to Atlantis easy as you please, just because Arthur asked. Orm asks his brother who these air breathers are, and is Batman their king? Like, which of these three is in charge? As Orm approaches, Batman grabs something off of his utility belt, and a flash of powder suddenly blinds Orm. Batman dashes backwards as the powder ignites, setting off an explosion in midair. Superman asks what that was, and Batman explains, saying that it was enough potassium to spark a reaction with the water. It shouldn't hurt either Aquaman or Orm permanently, but it should hurt. This is a real-world reaction, by the way, and you can find videos of potassium burning and sparking when exposed to water online. That is a super cool detail. Like, that's real-world science, and it is absolutely something that Batman would use as a weapon against a water-based threat. If this Justice League's continuity matched up with the previous universe's continuity of Justice League, I would almost think that Batman had devised this defense as a way to take down Aquaman. However, as far as I know, that plotline never happened in the New 52 Justice League comic books, so take your pick, continuity black hole, or continuity error, or just cool new idea for Batman to utilize. Anyways, Aquaman charges out of the flames, saying that they'll only make things worse if they try to fight Orm. And then he flooping decks Superman. Oh, my name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.12 of Aquaman, The Throne of Atlantis, Part 3. Wonder Woman looses her lasso on Aquaman, trying to restrain him. She says that he is the one who is making things worse. Aquaman struggles with the lasso, arguing that he is trying to defend both worlds. But Wonder Woman says that if her sisters from the Amazons were the ones launching this attack, she would be fighting against them, and not against her friends. Now, instead of trying to pull away from Wonder Woman, Aquaman suddenly turns and jumps at her, smashing both of them into the docks. As they continue to wrestle, Arthur says that he gets it. Somebody has to answer for all of this. But if the Atlantean army comes out of these waters, if they actually begin attacking Boston, then they're not just going to stop there. They're going to kill innocent people. There's no going back. And the Atlantean army will only be stopped when they're killed. They will fight to their dying breath. Wonder Woman promises Arthur that so will she. Then she punches him, launching Aquaman into a nearby ship. Ooh! He crawls out of the debris, wiping blood from his lips. Aquaman spots Batman approaching. I thought you understood, Bruce. Batman says that he does, as best he can. They can work together on this, but suddenly he's electrocuted. Orm grabs him by the cape, keeping Batman from collapsing in the water. We see the purple electrical effect arcing off of Orm's scepter, demonstrating who shocked him, just in case you were wondering. These air breathers are so fragile, aren't they? He says. A second charge should be enough to finish him off. And now Aquaman dashes forward, grabbing Orm by the wrists. He drops Batman, who is somehow perfectly positioned to not drown. Orm doesn't understand his brother's behavior. This human raised his hands to him, the king. It is his right to kill him. But Atlantean laws don't apply here, Arthur says. Has breathing this air rattled your brain, brother? Orm asks. First you threatened me, and then he attacked me, and now you're threatening me again? Arthur pushes into Orm's space. Listen, you are going back into the water, and you are ordering that army to go home. Do it now. Orm stands his ground. He thought that this retaliatory attack against Arthur's kingdom would be enough. But then he got here, and Arthur isn't king. What, is he trying to be one of them? Why? You're better than them. Mother would be disappointed, he says. I know I am. You've abandoned our world and joined another, a world that has done nothing but attack and poison us for centuries. From out of nowhere, Wonder Woman suddenly jumps Orm from behind, wrapping her arms around his head. I don't want to hurt you, she says, preparing to hurt him. Surrender now. But her weight and her own super strength barely throws Orm off balance. You see, he says to Arthur, they hate us. But we are done fearing the surface. We are done living in terror. It is time for war. Behind Orm, his army rises from the water. Atlantean guns burn into Wonder Woman's back, dislodging her from Orm. Hundreds of soldiers, maybe thousands, are decked out in metal armor defended by crab shell shields. Massive sea creatures covered in armor and weapons and lights rise up with them as lightning flashes in the sky. It is time to fight back. Aquaman draws his trident from his back, preparing to defend the surface world. And okay. That was a lot. Wow. I didn't want to interrupt this scene during the opening of the episode, as it really flows together really well, and everything here makes sense. It's really easy to read this and just get caught up in the story. Jeff Johns and the art team of Ivan Reis really just sell you on the seriousness of the moment. But that means that underneath all of the coolness, you know I've got complaints. The first is Arthur's general strategy here. He knew going into this meeting with his brother that Atlantis would respect a show of force the most out of all possible diplomatic options. That's how their culture is built. It is what they expect. So why not just give that to them? Back on the Watchtower in space, Arthur could have asked Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman to go down and fake an attack on Orm. You know, give him a beating, show him that they aren't messing around, and then Aquaman, the king of the surface world, could have shown up and beaten them back, maybe even berated them for acting without his consent, right? Arthur could have then sold the attack as his agents defending his kingdom while he was busy investigating who was really behind the attack, because we all agree that there's a third party here who's not Atlantis and it's not the surface world, but we don't know who that person is yet. Heck, Arthur could have even invited Orm to work alongside him in finding the real culprit, right? Who then could have been given to Atlantis as a sign of good faith. Here's the dude who hurt you guys first. We apologize. Stop attacking the surface world. Thank you very much. Even hecker, Aquaman could have volunteered the League or their resources in helping to restore and rebuild Atlantis. Like, give them the show of good faith. Like, all of this would have been lying. Agreed. Playing into Orm's misconception of what the surface world is, but Arthur hid his past from his girlfriend. He lied to the others, capital O, repeatedly. He hid his past from the Justice League. Like, they didn't even know that he wasn't the king of Atlantis anymore. This guy is a consummate liar. What's one more lie if it helps bring about peace instead of war? Admittedly, Johns has never shown Aquaman to be a real strategist during this run. He has just blindly charged from one problem to another so far, just kind of punching things until they stopped being problems. Even when he was working with the others, his only real order was for them to let him handle this thing alone and get out of here, guys. There was no real plan. There was no real strategy. So, I mean, maybe Arthur just isn't a thinking man. Honestly, Batman would have been the guy to come up with a plan, capital P, but Batman wouldn't have known enough about Atlantean culture to make the plan anyways. And again, I don't think Aquaman and Batman are going to have a lot of time to sit down and be like, so here's the Atlantean socio-political structure. This is how we're going to take advantage of it. Or this is what it is, Batman, how do we take advantage of it? And then Batman spends 12 hours coming up with a plan. I don't know. It's just, I understand why this kind of plan wasn't how they approached it. It just frustrates me a little bit that that's not how they approached it. I don't know. I guess maybe if it was pre-New 52 Aquaman, who had decades of comic book experience under his belt, I would have expected him to be a little more, like, sly along those lines. I would have expected him to have the experience necessary to be like, here is how I shall play this situation. Whereas New 52 Aquaman has only been doing this for 6-ish years. And again, he's never been shown to be a real strategist or leader in the field. He's just a punch that thing kind of guy. And I mean, he's good at it. It works. So I get it. My second complaint is just Superman in general. I will freely admit that I don't have a lot of Superman comics in my comic collection, as large as it is. Outside of the Our Worlds at War crossover, which I've covered on the show before, I don't own any Superman back issues, actually. I don't even think for any of the crossovers for the DC books that I do have do I own any Superman comics. I have been trying out the 2 current ongoing series, and I like them so far, but I'm hesitant to say that I have a deep understanding of the character. But this version of Superman, particularly in this issue, feels way more confrontational, much more eager for a fight, and kind of like less careful than someone with his kind of power should be. At least in my mind, I guess. Maybe that's just my read on the character, my interpretation of Superman. When Aquaman was proposing that he try to talk Orm down initially on the Watchtower, Superman was outright opposed to it. He didn't even give, like, a reason, like, Arthur, you're an arrogant hothead and we love you, but I have never seen you de-escalate a situation that you could punch your way out of. No, he just says, we can't afford to give you that time. Because, why? Is he upset that innocent people have been killed? Like, I'll buy that as a motivator for Superman, but, like, give me that, tell me that, or demonstrate that at the very least. It would be one thing if Arthur was like, give me a chance to talk to Orm, I need to stop him, and then Superman would be like, look, even if you go down there and stop him, he can't walk away. Hundreds of people have died, somebody needs to pay for it, and sure, maybe this attack was instigated by a third party, and we find that person and we give them to Atlantis, but Orm is leading Atlantis. Orm has killed hundreds of people, he will need to surrender himself. And I don't see you being capable of doing that, Arthur. And then you would have Batman step up and be like, well, I mean, we give him a shot. Like, it's one thing if he fails and then we step in and we beat everybody up. But, like, give him a shot, right, Soups? Like, that's what we do. Like, I would be okay with that. Like, okay, how about this? I know that Jim Gordon turned on the bat signal in Gotham City in order to address Batman regarding the kidnappers from Aquaman issue 15, a throwaway plotline that is so in the background of the comic that it is only there because we need to know that Batman is doing something. Batman could have just been posing darkly on the docks, being like, I suspect that people are up to something on the docks. And then Aquaman shows up and be like, hey, I got a problem, help me with it. But no, I know more about the Jim Gordon situation than I know about Superman's motivation going into this fight. And that boggles my mind in a Justice League comic book. Otherwise, complaints now complained, I do like the back and forth ping pong ball nature of the fight, right? Everyone gets a cool scene and a cool moment, and I especially like Wonder Woman trying to wrap Aquaman in her lasso. Because that thing is the lasso of truth, and when someone is touching it, they cannot lie. Arthur tells her, when wrapped up in the rope, that he is trying to help both worlds, the surface and Atlantis, and he means it. He isn't evil, he isn't brainwashed, he hasn't turned on the Justice League. He thinks he's doing the right thing here. Which doesn't mean that he is, but it means that he believes he is. This is one of those cool, unspoken details that Johns does absolutely no work to point out at all, but if you know Wonder Woman and you understand the lore surrounding her, then you get a little extra bit of storytelling from that moment that is just really cool. This is why I kind of suspect that Superman is so upset because innocent people have died, but I know so little about this version of Superman, having read none of Superman New 52's stuff, that I just don't have a good read on his character. I don't know how different he is from what I think of as classic Superman. At Cyborg's location, the 3 Atlantean warriors struggle with him as he tries to defend Dr. Shin. One of them, a young woman named Tula, claps a small device on Cyborg's arm. It discharges an electrical burst, but it's not enough to stop Cyborg. It does drive the water people away, though, because I'm assuming they're weak to electricity, which gives Cyborg a chance to get to Dr. Shin. He tears off his car's door, hope you didn't need that, pulls the man out, and then warns him that the first time always hurts. Before Shin can ask what hurts, a teleport effect detonates around them, whisking them away. If you're wondering if the name Tula means anything, it certainly does. Tula was the third character to bear the name Aqua Girl, the counterpart to Aqualad Garth, who we sorta met in a throwaway line back in Aquaman issue 14. She has been recast in the New 52 continuity as a member of the Drift, which is an Atlantean strike team. Much like Garth, if you know who this character is, hey, good for you! But if you don't know who she is, well then you've got a random Atlantean named for your benefit. Congratulations. Tula is dressed differently than the other two members of the Drift, which really just disrupts the theming of the covert strike squad thing they have going on. This is done so that Tula stands out and is more memorable as a character. So even if you are unfamiliar with her history and you don't recognize the name Tula, she's still going to stand out to you as a reader anyways. She does comment when battling Cyborg that he is made with technology that she doesn't understand. That's because Cyborg's body is derived from apocalyptic technology. It is literally not of this Earth, advanced beyond even Atlantis' understanding. That's why her electrical burst device didn't do the effect on him that she wanted it to, and why it surprises her so much. That is some cool detailing! Again, Jeff Johns doesn't tell us that this is why this happens. You are meant to put it together yourself. But if you've been reading the books and you know the background information regarding Cyborg, then it helps to inform your total experience. This is a really cool way of rewarding long-term readers who have read the previous 15 issues of Justice League. I guess 16 issues because there's a 0 issue in there. With interesting little story elements that help kind of reference older stuff without being like, hey, in order to understand this reference I just made, you need to go read Justice League issue, or whatever. That's really cool writing. Back in Boston, Superman and Wonder Woman are fighting the Atlantean army. They're trying to find Batman in all the chaos, because remember, last we knew, he was unconscious, just barely floating above the water. Aquaman, meanwhile, swings his trident in an arc before him, trying to force the warriors back. He orders them to go home, but they retort that he isn't the king anymore. They don't take orders from him. A low hum comes from Aquaman's head as he tries to summon help, a hum that Orm can feel. He presses in on his brother, smiling, telling him that the sea life has all fled. Then the eyes of his helmet start to glow purple, and they hum their own tune. The creatures won't answer Arthur's summons, but the oceans will heed his. A twisting column of water suddenly rises up around Wonder Woman. We hear one of the warriors shout, "The king has her!" But a quick blast of freezing breath from Superman freezes the water spout, allowing him to smash it and pull her out. She floats off to the side, gathering herself, and Superman shouts, "Atlanteans!" His eyes glow red, and then he orders them, "Retreat!" Superman unleashes his heat vision, boiling the ocean around them. Aquaman, meanwhile, is busy fighting Orm. Superman is the most powerful being on the face of this planet, he says, and you've just pissed him off. But the fighting isn't enough to stop Orm. In fact, if anything, it just gave him some room to work. That creature thinks it can wrest control of the oceans away from me, Orm says. His scepter charges with blue-green energy crackling. Above them, the stormy skies start to rumble. Orm says that his helmet lets him control the oceans, and his trident lets him control the storms. Raw lightning strikes down, hitting Wonder Woman, Superman, and Aquaman. And this isn't to the degree that they can just shrug it off either. These are characters who have super strength and some form of enhanced endurance, and we can see their flooping skeletons like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Water spouts scoop up the now unconscious Justice League, displaying their bodies around the triumphant king of Atlantis, Orm. And he smiles wildly to himself. You are hereby sentenced to the dark waters, brother, as are your allies. All right. That all works for me. That is dope as hell. There's just one thing about the scene that I want to point out. Orm's trident allows him to control storms. And back at the end of the Others arc, when Black Manta was dropping off the dead king's scepter, the buyer ordered someone to increase the intensity of the storm. Is weather controlling technology something that is common in Atlantis? Is this just something they do naturally? Or is this something that Orm alone has access to? Did Jeff Johns just give us a clue as to who hired Black Manta? Or is this just another thing that Atlanteans can do? I mean, it's either something or it's nothing. And it's kind of hard to tell which. Back at the Watchtower, Cyborg finally arrives with Dr. Shin and does introductions with Volko. But the old man said that they don't have time for pleasantries. Orm has the League, and they're being taken into the waters. As he says this, we see the frozen bodies of the Justice League being loaded into Atlantean crafts. Orm stands nearby, watching the ships sink below the waves. May they suffer like the surface world will, he curses. Today, they sink a city. We then bounce to Star Labs in Detroit, Michigan, where we find Cyborg's father, Silas, and one of his contemporaries, Dr. T.O. Morrow. If these storms keep up, hundreds more people will die from them alone, Silas says. Morrow excitedly suggests that he activate his weather machine. Come on, man! Silas argues against it because it's just too dangerous. It's built from monitor technology from another dimension that they barely understand. It's unstable, it's too risky, and Silas just cannot risk unleashing it in the middle of an already existing emergency. If they want robots, then Morrow can call Dr. Will Magnus and try and borrow his. This kind of hilariously sets Morrow off. Like, he does not like this idea. Like, Will Magnus, he says, is a misanthropic child, and his Metal Men project is a failure. The military is already shutting it down. Even they don't think that it's a good idea. His weather machine is the only option that they have. If they don't bring it online now, then who do they have left to help them? Cyborg suddenly teleports down into the room. He tells his dad about the Justice League's capture. He says that he needs that environmental unit that he mentioned last episode. How soon can it be installed? Silas hesitates, actually. Victor said he didn't want it. I mean, they would need to remove his lung, and here, Victor cuts him off. There's no time to argue, and there's no time to be sentimental about this. The Justice League needs him now. Just leave his heart and his brain intact. Those are all that he needs to still be human, right? But there is a problem with the procedure. Even going as fast as they can, the installation surgery is still going to take a couple of hours. And the world doesn't have that kind of time. I mean, at least Boston doesn't have that kind of time. I don't know about the world. Cyborg says that the Justice League really wanted to vet these folks more before they brought them in. But he doesn't have another choice right now. They need backup. He connects to the grid, and he issues a call. This is Cyborg of the Justice League. We need your help. The world needs your help. In the Watchtower, a wall of screens comes to life. On them, we see a variety of superhumans and heroes. Characters like Green Arrow, Element Woman, Black Lightning, Vixen, Shazam, Hawkman, Zatanna, Gold Rush, Black Canary, and Firestorm. Cyborg's voice finishes his message. Welcome to the Justice League. That's a cool way to end the issue, right? Like, I'm pumped talking about it. And it's probably been like a full week since I reread this issue and then did the write-up for it. And then I actually recorded this episode once before, but for whatever reason, my mic wasn't on. So it didn't work. Just didn't work. So I had to redo it. And like getting back to the moment, being in the moment, giving y'all that line. God, that's cool. And I wasn't expecting when I reread this issue for the League to actually get beaten by Orm, of all people. Like, maybe forced into a retreat or something, sure, but like outright beaten? Captured? Sentenced to whatever the dark waters are? I mean, I'm assuming they're waters where things are dark, but like, what does that really mean as far as threats go? Superman can fly in space without oxygen. Like, good luck trying to drown him. All we have up top. Right? All we have up top, the only backup we have that in theory we have a good understanding of, if we had been reading all of Justice League up to this point, is Cyborg. And he's going to be busy getting his oil changed with an army of untrusted rookies. All while Orm is preparing to turn Boston into Neo Atlantis. Those are some really cool stakes for a story. There is a little bit of element with some of these characters where Geoff Johns has been introducing them a little bit in Justice League up to this point. Green Arrow has tried out for Justice League a couple times at this point in the narrative, and they've always been like, you're not bad at what you do, man, but we don't need you. Like, please go away. Like, leave us alone. Of course, Shazam was being introduced in the backup feature, which I've already talked about a little bit on the podcast, and characters like Hawkman and Firestorm have actually already had ongoing series as part of the New 52. I don't remember if they were still around by the time we got to issue 16 in the New 52, but they were known properties within the universe. I just don't believe the Justice League had run into them at this point. But still, it just goes to show that rebooting everything and kind of sort of putting these characters back to the same starting point creates some interesting stakes where we don't know if Hawkman and Firestorm are as skilled and proficient as they used to be in the old universe, because that universe doesn't exist anymore. These are unknown quantities. That's really cool and kind of super exciting for me, even as a dude who's reading these 12 years after they were initially released. Wow. Johns mostly uses this final scene in two ways. He uses Wonder Woman and Superman to distract the Atlantean army, to keep them from attacking Boston outright. Johns is trying to limit casualties. Both of these characters are incredibly fast. They are both super strong. They are incredibly defensive. Honestly, they're a great first line of defense. And when Wonder Woman gets frozen, we see Superman race to her aid and pull her out as fast as he can. After he ensures that she is safe, he then unleashes his heat vision on the Atlanteans, and the creative team makes this scene really intense. This isn't just Superman fighting back, right? He is boiling the Atlanteans alive. And here is a scene where I actually don't have a problem with Superman's behavior, because Johns previously established that Superman and Wonder Woman are trying out being a couple. This isn't just Superman defending a teammate of his. He's defending his girlfriend. I will admit that I don't really like Wonder Woman's main role in this story being basically backup for Superman or a damsel to be rescued by Superman. Comic fans refer to the Trinity as the Trinity because they are equals, right? Maybe not in terms of powers, but in terms of their narrative weight, of their importance, their role, right, in the DC universe. Having Wonder Woman get frozen and then be saved by her boyfriend kind of takes away from her ability to handle herself in the field. And she's a warrior freaking princess! If she felt more differentiated as a character from Superman within the story, I would probably be less bothered, but she doesn't feel more differentiated at all. When Superman says that they can't wait for Arthur to handle Orm, she agrees. When Superman threatens Orm, she backs him up. Their overlapping powers and costume designs, I'll say it, have almost made them overlapping characters in this story, and I think that's a real shame. Although it did just occur to me while I was writing this, that maybe the reason that Superman is so much quicker to violence in this story is because of Wonder Woman's warrior influence. Johns certainly writes Wonder Woman as a much harder character in combat than I'm certainly used to seeing her. And again, I don't have a lot of Wonder Woman issues. I've seen her guest star in a couple of the other comics I've read. I've actually fully collected Gail Simone's run on Wonder Woman. I just haven't read it yet. And it was actually during the New 52 reboot that she started to regularly use a sword in combat. She had previously used a sword and a shield and a spear throughout her decades of existence, but she never really used them on a regular basis. They were kind of something she would bring out when things were as bad as they could be, while in the New 52, she's just swinging it around willy-nilly. So maybe her joie de vivre of combat has rubbed off on Superman a bit thanks to their dating, which is an interesting idea. It's an incredibly subtle one, if that is the case, but we have certainly seen other subtle bits of storytelling in this story arc, so I wouldn't put it past Geoff Johns. But while those two are holding the line against Atlantis, Aquaman is busy with Orm, still trying. You gotta give the man credit. Arthur has one plan, and he is sticking to it. He does try to summon some aquatic backup, which again, I think is done really well, because we've seen another situation, Aquaman tries to rush in and punch people, and then when the punching doesn't work, he goes, oh, wait, fish! And traditionally, it hasn't really worked out all that well. But again, it does feel right for the character. It's something we've seen him do before, and it just doesn't work out here because there's no sea life to summon. Remember, the creatures from the trench were unleashed and are heading to the eastern seaboard. Was that a move made specifically by Orm in order to keep the sea life from helping Arthur during this attack? Because if so, that is a great move. That is cunning as hell. But if he did make that move, that's also really stupid because his army is on the eastern seaboard, and the trench have shown that they are willing to eat kind of whatever form of meat they can get their hands on. I don't think Atlantean's off the menu, boys. I do really, really like Orm's dig at Arthur during their confrontation. Once it is finally clear to him that Arthur isn't the surface world's king and that he's just another one of them, Orm says that he is disappointed, and their mother would be too. That's a fascinating line, right? Because one of the ideas that Geoff Johns has played with, and I don't think he's played with it very well, but it is established at the very least, is the idea that Arthur's background is a story that was told to him by his father, and it might not be true. We saw him doubt that he was Atlantean at all back in issue 0, and admittedly, it was for like 5 minutes, because then we turned the page and he met Volko, but still, even he was like, maybe I'm not Atlantean, maybe Atlantis isn't real, maybe I'm just some crazy space baby with space powers, like, I don't know. And the only stuff that we know about his mother, Atlanta, is what we have been told through other people's stories. Those of Tom Curry and Volko. Even to us, those are third-hand stories. Tom told his son that his mother had to leave and that he would watch for her every morning. That's literally all we really know about Tom Curry's relationship with Atlanta. But we don't know what Atlanta told Tom about her situation. And Volko's story sure does benefit Volko, immediately allying Arthur with his own goals, acting as a way for him to get back into Atlantean society and a restoration of his old role as advisor to the king. We do not know Atlanta's story at all. So I could believe that maybe, in an alternate telling of Atlanta's story, she hid herself away because she got pregnant by a human, and then she fled to the surface world and dropped off her illegitimate half-breed with its father, where maybe she didn't want to keep it, but she didn't want to kill it either. So I'll just throw this baby to the humans, I'll have a new kid, because when she returned, we know that she married the captain of the guard, she gave birth to Orm. Orm eventually became king of Atlantis. I could see a story being told that Atlanta never wanted Arthur or Tom, and I could see Atlantis selling that story to its people. That could be a story that was fed to Orm. And we don't know if that's any more true than what was fed to Arthur, right? We don't know Atlanta. We've never met Atlanta. Oh, that's fascinating background detail to me. This to me is one of those really good uses of the black hole of background continuity that is the New 52, right? Because nobody is exploring Atlanta's story. We just get to see the fallout of what happened to her, and the truth of her life is just gone. And it leads to these problems, these complications, and that's good storytelling. That's meaty, baby. Oh, I love it. Otherwise, I'm pretty cool with how the scene wraps up at the very end. Orm takes the League down, captures them, they're put off the board, at least for now, leaving us with just Cyborg as backup. A lot of this portion of the comic is basically just Geoff Johns teasing DC nerds, as far as I'm concerned. Dr. T.O. Morrow, and yes, it is meant to be a play on the word tomorrow, is the guy who originally created the character the Red Tornado, another longtime Justice League member in the classic continuity, but one who has not made his New 52 debut yet. According to what I was able to find online, the New 52 never actually debuted a version of the Red Tornado, which is a real shame, in my opinion. The Red Tornado is famously able to fly by manipulating air, generally demonstrated by creating a tornado effect around its lower half. So Morrow postulating that he could help with the storms isn't totally outside the realm of possibility. Giving him the ability to manipulate storms outright would certainly be an increase in his capabilities. and power level. That would be, like, it just occurred to me that the Red Tornado could be the Storm of the Justice League, and I'm just like, whoa, that would be super dope. It's clear, it's spoilers, we're not going to get there within this story, but that's a neat idea, right? Ooh. Dr. Will Magnus, on the other hand, did create a group of androids called the Metal Men, each one of whom is named after a different element, such as iron, gold, mercury, and so on. Much like Red Tornado, this group of characters had not yet appeared in the New 52 either, so Jeff Johns is either teeing them up, or he's just teasing, hey, are you guys excited about this? If you are, we'll do something with it. Unfortunately, we will not see them or the Red Tornado by the end of this arc. Sorry, folks. But this scene also establishes how few options America, and specifically Boston, has left at this point. Things are so bad that Silas and Dr. Morrow are talking about using unfinished and unsuccessful robots in the field, which leads us nicely into Cyborg's play. With the big hitters down and Cyborg about to drop off the board for some elective surgery, he needs someone to run interference, and so he calls in the rookies. To be fair, a lot of those characters are fairly big names, and I certainly hope that you recognize some of them, dear listeners. But in the New 52, many of those characters were still fairly new, or had no real history with the Justice League yet, as I mentioned before. This move also puts the Trinity kinda safely in Aquaman's story hands, for at least our next issue, right? They have been sentenced to the water, and out of those 4 characters, who's the one most comfortable there? Aquaman. They are now depending on him to save their lives in that story, which is really great stakes. Then I would figure they'll probably figure out the underwater stuff, free themselves, return to the surface, and then they will team up with the new Justice League recruits in order to defeat Atlantis and beat up Orm and whatever the story will end. At least that's what I'm putting my money on. I have not yet read the final 2 issues of the Throne of Atlantis crossover as of this recording, so I still don't know how this ends. But that's always exciting because I get to find out. Not quite at the same time as you guys, but close to the same time as you folks, which is great for me. This scene also demonstrates that Victor Stone is a hero at heart. He will literally be sacrificing himself in order to help people, and that's pretty dope. If any of us were doubting his heroism as he unfortunately was sidelined up in the satellite, he is about to prove us floopin' wrong, and that's great. Next time, it's war. Aquaman and his allies are sentenced to the dark waters, the very bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But they find more than just a way to escape. They find the key to all of this. And while they're doing that, the person who made all of this happen, the third party who set this whole thing into motion, is finally revealed. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.13 of Aquaman, The Throne of Atlantis, Part 4. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.